Welcome, everybody. From MNT-EC, the Micro Nanotechnology Education Center, and JATE, the Journal of Advanced Technological Education, this is the JATE Writing Studio. In each session, we'll have a guided conversation with a published author. We highlight authors who publish articles in peer-reviewed journals like JATE so that they can share their story and writing processes with you. We want to give authors a voice to share their tips and tricks about how to write peer-reviewed journal articles. Today, our panel moderator will be Mel Cassette, the MNT-EC co-PI and colleague from Edmonds College. Today, we are pleased to introduce our panel of authors, April Chung from Purdue University in Indiana, Ishmael Fidan from Tennessee Tech University in Tennessee, Venancio Fuentes from Mohawk Valley Community College in New York, and Martin Reed from Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. They are here to discuss their paper, Overview of ABET Accreditation from a Perspective of Two-Year Programs. Panelists, welcome and thank you for joining us today. And with that, Mel, can you start the panel?
I can. Thank you, Jared. Thank you for welcoming everybody. And it's so good to see everybody. Happy Friday, and hope that everybody's getting ready for a great weekend. I am very excited about this panel, and we want to start out, and thank you everybody for the panelists for being here. Want to start out very quickly by asking each of the panelists, starting with April, if you will, April, who you are, where do you work, and what do you do? What is your job?
Hi, everybody. Thank you, everybody, for having us here. I'm April Chung. I work for Purdue University in West Lafayette, Indiana. I'm a faculty of the Electrical Engineering Technology program, and I'm also the program lead there. I'm also the Engineering Technology Accreditation Commission of ETAC in 2021 and 22.
Thank you. Impressive. Ishmael?
Thank you, Mel. I'm Ismail Fidan, a faculty member at Tennessee Tech University. I've been teaching design and manufacturing courses here and doing quite a bit of innovations in the 3D printing technologies with my research team. With the authors, I've been working almost I say 8 years or 10 years, April especially 10 years, through ABET. I was a commissioner in engineering technology commission. Then for the last 4 years, I've been in the board of delegates representing SME's engineering technology delegation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Very well done. Venancio.
Hey, good afternoon. I'm Benny Fuentes. At the time of the article, I was actually retiring from my previous job at County College of Morris, which was a 2-year community college in New Jersey. I was a department head there and almost 30 years there. I am now a full-time faculty member at Mohawk Valley Community College. So I've spent my whole teaching career in 2-year programs. And I am currently serving as a ETAC commissioner, and also I am on the executive committee. Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Vinny. And Marty.
Yes, hi, good afternoon. Marty Reed. I'm an adjunct at Georgetown University. I teach project management in the master's degree program there. Done that for about 7 years now. Most of my career was at IBM. My academic background was, all my degrees are in electrical engineering. And early in my career, I did a lot of engineering work. And then, the way these things go is you advance, move into manage is where I spent most of my career. I've been with ABET in various capacities for probably 25 years, starting as a program evaluator through IEEE, the Electrical Engineering Society, and then advancing to ABET as a commissioner on the ETAC. I'm currently a member of the ExCom on ETAC.
Good. Excellent. Thank you. And thank you all for providing us that bit of information and giving us a little bit of background and why this is such an important topic. We have a host of questions that we would like to ask everybody, and we'll be going through with all the different panelists. So I will, if it's okay with everyone, I will ask directly to the different panelists to answer some of those questions. And so hopefully we can get through these pretty quickly. There's a lot of information, though, lots of information. So I'm going to start out with April. April, can you very briefly describe the article we're going to be discussing? Just a couple of sentences, because we'll be talking more in detail on the article later on.
Sure, Mel. So this is really specifically about ABET accreditation for 2-year programs. And as you know, ABET is a accreditation agency for programs in higher education, specifically in the STEM field. And there is a lot of information about 4-year accreditations by ABET, and not so much about 2-year programs. And so this is a paper that is specifically more geared towards 2-year community colleges.
Excellent. Thank you. Good description. Marty and Ishmael, I'm going to pose this question to you. What is your writing background? Where did you learn how to write peer-reviewed journal articles? Ishmael, you want to go first?
Yes, I can. Here and there, we do quite a bit of technical papers dealing with the archival research, but such paper that published in Journal of Advanced Technological Education is educational paper and a review paper. Or usually you don't see such papers much. It requires quite a bit of in-depth investigation, knowledge, and collecting the data from here and there. Honestly, I don't have that much background on such things, but it's a collaborative effort, as you see from the article. And we got together and shared the work and get things together. We'll talk about the details later on how we did that. This was kind of different. It is not like writing a thesis. It's not like writing a research paper. Gathering all the information and putting together, that was unique from our perspective too. During the graduate school years, there were courses like graduate level technical writing or dissertation writing. I don't have experience on those things. It was elective in my years. But later on, with the consultation of your committee members and advisors, you dive into it and learn. From my side, that was the experience.
Good, thank you. Marty?
Sure, thanks. So I'd say my experience writing peer-reviewed articles and related material came from the technical part of my earlier career, where I was in a group that did performance analysis on time-shared computer systems. We were working closely with the IBM research group at that point. So they were also kind of a conduit as well as a mentor in some sense for how to go about writing peer-reviewed or articles for trade press or journals. So some of this was kind of experience. I've probably written, half a dozen to a dozen articles, but it was early in my career. So I got a sense of how that process works. It's kind of like Ishmael, my tech writing in college was not substantial. We did have to, prepare papers and other deliverables for the classes, but I'd say it's more practice after that. The other experience I have is being on the other side of this as a peer reviewer. And I've been part of a peer review group for a number of journal articles, trade press articles, as well as, and some of my fellow colleagues have done this as well, being a reviewer for National Science Foundation research proposals.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So I'm going to tag team Marty and Vinny on this question. How did you come up with the idea for this article? What is the main idea behind it? And why is this article so important? Why did you write it?
Marty took it.
I
want to go first? Yeah.
Yeah, I can take a quick crack at it.
Okay.
So we first of all I think we need to acknowledge, that Ishmael was really, I would say, the driver behind this, right? This is an idea he developed. There's a lot of the credit for recruiting us, his colleagues, to participate as we bring different kind of roles and experiences from ABET to bear. But he was certainly the author, and then or the main author. And then after we came together, we started identifying what topics we would have and who'd be best served to draft each section. And that generally would tie back to where our current responsibilities were in ABET and in ETAC. I mean, for example, I'm currently the chair of the criteria committee within ETAC. Mm-hmm. So given that, when we had a section in the paper that talked about criteria, both the general ETAC criteria and program-specific criteria, that's the one that I took a crack at. And the importance of the article, I'd say, is from many perspectives. One is that as I think we know, graduation from accredited programs is sometimes
I would add that from my perspective,
I'm sorry, who was that, Marty?
I think someone else is maybe
Winnie, but
Penny, were you? I didn't mean to not pause and give you a chance to jump in, so let me let you go ahead.
Penny?
Yeah, Mel, I'm going to apologize. I may be having some issues. I'm going to kill my video for a second. This is a personal thing for me. I've been involved in ABET for almost 20 years as starting off as a PEV and as a department head. Every 6 years when we had to go through the process, the question would always come up, what is the value of going through the effort from a 2-year community college point of view? So that's really one of the reasons I got involved in this. And again, but kudos to Ishmael because he really was the driving force behind this, but it was, once we agreed on a topic, I was all in. So that's all I want to add.
Mm-hmm. Good. It's a very timely topic as we move into these programs and expanding programs. So thank you for that. I'm going to ask this question to everybody, but Ishmael, I'm going to start it out with you. How did you find co-authors for this article? I've heard that you were the catalyst for this. So how did you find the authors? When you can't find a co-author, what do you do? And how did the co-authors contribute to writing the paper?
Heavy question, but I'll try to answer. Thank you, Mel. We've been in this business together with April, Winnie, and Marty together, as I've said, for years and years. And April was the ETech chair for several years. And I worked with her in the training committee at least 5 years before Kirk was the lead. When I started the first year, I shared with her first. She said yes. And her task was the general info, generic. What is ABET internationally, terminology, and how it works. And there was one in the team. That was great. Then I just had a visit with Marty, and I shared with Marty. Marty, can you? He's also the chair of criteria committee. Things work so nicely, and Marty said, "Yes, Ismail, I can do it." And even he talked about the harmonization and compared with other commissions and stuff like that. Came up with a really unique way of writing it. Then Winnie, can you do the timeline? Because we need somebody, because it's such a broad topic and there are several pieces to cover. Winnie said, yes, I can do that too. Then the team was ready. When the time comes, your second question, can I do it myself? It's really tough. It's just so much coverage and so much to do. That could take me like maybe 6 months if I could do it myself. But this way, 4 of us, I think 2 or 3 months we made it, submitted, and revisions and stuff like that took time. And we post everything to Google Doc, and through the Google Doc, everybody put their section, and we made things ready, and we started having the Zoom calls. I think we did 2 or 3 Zoom calls and check the progress. When we done it, even not just the 4 of us, we asked Tom Hall, Tom, can you do the reading and proofreading? And then he said yes. Then we contacted the adjunct director. What is his name? Frank Hart. Yeah, Frank said, why not? And let me give you the contribution and things to add, things to delete. Frank Hart did. Not just the 4 of us, it was the 6. And the last minute, April said, let me check with the ABAT's new communication director. And we checked with her and she read through and gave us suggestions. And we finalized it. It's a full teamwork capacity, Mel.
Excellent. Teamwork, right? Teamwork. Yeah. How about Benny? Can you add to that?
In terms of, actually, Mel, I think you covered it well.
Why did you agree to participate?
Why did I agree? Anytime Ishmael comes to me and asks me to do it, I mean, that's I'm sorry, that's pretty much what it is.
Yeah.
I've known Ishmael a long time, and I totally agree with that statement.
Yeah, me too.
April, how about you?
Yes, me too. Ishmael say, "Hey, April, we need to do something about a paper." I'm like, sure. And then when he mentioned Marty and Vinny, I'm like, absolutely, because I've worked with them for many years, and you know how everybody works together. And between the 4 of us, we work very well. We always meet our deadline. Once we set the deadline, we have a way of getting to the deadline on time. And so I know this is a good team, and I never give up any opportunity to work with great team members. So
Good point. Good point. Marty, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think, Ishmael again covered it pretty well. I mean, what would any of us do if we're faced with a task like this, where it really should be divided among multiple people who have the experience, the skills, and so on? We reach out to the people we know the best, who we've worked with before. We know what their strengths are. We know what they can contribute. And as in many things, you tend to go to the people who are the busiest. So in terms of will they agree or not, well, it starts with who they are, our relationship. And even if they're busy, I mean, April basically said, yes, before she really understood what was required, because, she's certainly a very busy person, as we all are. But, that's what you generally tend to do. And that's, I think, what we found here. We all have worked with each other on ETAC, many of us on IEEE related committees and topics. Ishmael and I were heavily involved in developing a new program criteria for mechatronics, which recently got approved and piloted. And that was no small task because of the multidisciplinary nature of it. So we've all been together in various roles for many years, and I think it was kind of a natural.
And Mel, can I just add one thing too?
Yes.
The idea that, if we had to do this on our own, I wouldn't have done it. So, the idea that we were a team, I think, made it possible. And it just goes to, again, knowing the team that you're working with and working well with them. But I think a team effort pays off, at least to get started with this.
Do you think, Vinny, that accountability to each other is also important?
I think April and Mark, again, we've worked well with each other. And so, yes. And, it's great. Everybody, actually, I think that's you don't want to put down any of your teammates, but I think this group, no one's afraid to kind of push somebody else to move us along. I've worked with April, as an editor and stuff like that. If I was behind on my statement, she would reach out to me, and I had no problem with that. So, constructive criticism from my teammates here is well worth it. So, yeah.
It sounds like there is also some nurturing, which is great for teamwork. Excellent. So I want to circle back really quick, Ishmael, because as we work with students and others who are thinking about wanting to write an article, a journal article, we always know that it's just getting started, right? Getting started is sometimes is the hardest part. So what did you do? What was the first thing you did, Ishmael, once you decided you wanted to write this paper?
After getting yes from everybody, our life became Zoom. Let's get together and do the Zoom. Communication is, even it's a part of criterion 3, and just the teamwork and the communication. The team got together, share the work, and where we're gonna have the draft. Google Doc. We put things to Google Doc. Everybody wrote their stuff, and you can even see the real time. And we were able to see the progress of what we've been doing through the Google Doc. Then the deadlines. If there's no deadline, again, there is no progress. Our deadline was usually 2 weeks, and then either emails and calls, and it really worked it out really good for us. Teamwork, communication, deadlines, task to-dos, and the outcome was great.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it was. Yes, it was. I've heard several of you now mention ABET, and you really have done quite a bit of work with them, being ETAC commissioners and being an XCOM and holding different offices, being program evaluators, which we call PEVs. And I know you four are very, very busy people and very productive people, by the way, and very experienced. So we appreciate you taking the time to do this talk today. But one of the things that I'm hearing too is sometimes writers feel like they don't have enough time. They don't have enough participants. They don't have enough experience. And they just, they're not sure, how are they going to do this? How do you know when you have enough to start writing the article and you have the information? And I'd like to direct that question to April and Vinny. How do you know when you have enough material? April?
Sure. I a lot of times I don't. But what happened is I start. It doesn't matter. At the beginning of the day, I get into my office, I just start writing something, and eventually I got something. And then so the first thing I think is really important is Ishmael started it, and then we have some kind of outline on and our own topics that we are accountable for. And so I started with that, and I just start writing. It doesn't matter. I just, there's so many things that I deleted, but I just started. And once I started that writing, and I'm consistent about it, and I don't write for a long time, an hour a little bit here, an hour a little bit there, and then I go on to do my other things. And that's my way of working. I do, just a little bit, and then I go away and do something else, and keep my mind fresh. And so that's how and I'm sure everybody has their own way of doing something, and that's just my way of doing it. And then when another thing is really important is the deadline. And before, a few days before that, I just have to say, okay, I'm stopping and I'm going to refine it. And all through, I go back and look through it and I refine it and keep going on that. And I also rely on a lot of people like in this team, and then going back and look at it and then say, okay, this might be better. This might flow better. This is irrelevant. And all of those things, like I count on others to give me the feedback.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Very good. Benny?
I was just going to add, I think one of the things is having a starting point. I know one of the things you have on the website for the journal articles for this site is the template. So having a starting point is kind of a critical thing. The other thing that really worked well, again, is this shared environment, Google Docs or Office, whatever, 365, where you can kind of see what other people are putting into the article. So it is not something, so you're running it synchronously, or, basically it's an environment where you can kind of see what other people are adding in. And like April said, my method is I start writing, but as I walk away, my mind keeps working on it.
Mm-hmm.
So occasionally I'll come back and just add content to it. But
Mm-hmm.
having a starting point, I think, is critical.
Good point. Good point. So we've heard about a little bit of writing styles here, and I think that's important. Thank you for sharing that. So Marty, I'm going to address this to you. How do you write a peer-reviewed journal? I mean, is there a structure you use? Is it top to bottom, front to back, topics? What's your style?
So I guess, and maybe this ties back a little bit to what Benny was just saying. One thing is, and I learned this obviously from life and my project management experiences. What's the scope of what I'm trying to accomplish? April mentioned the timeline, which is certainly important. So building a plan for writing the paper means we have a schedule in place. We have a scope in place, which is, what's the content of the thing that I'm responsible for? And I think we defined that when the four of us got together and kind of picked the general topics. And in terms of the cost, the other dimension of project management, that comes down to my time. Within that window of time, how much time am I going to spend on it? So I had to factor in all those things. I also try to factor in things like, what does it mean on the other end for a peer reviewer who's looking at our work product? And I know they're going to be looking at, in addition to the guidance for this particular activity, it's generally a matter of things like looking for specifics and evidence and examples so that any conclusions and recommendations that come out of this are supported by the data that we put into it. Mm-hmm. So I factor that in. But then, my general style is, and April mentioned this as well, and I think Benny did as well, we look at what others have written, but, knowing how I work, which is I easily get distracted or, get into minutia, right? Mm-hmm. So I try really hard to focus on my section first. The very first thing I do is focus on my section, build a list of topics and the points I want to cover that I want to make sure, come out of that writing. And then just try to sit down and write the whole thing, and not be so concerned with sentence structure and with repeating myself and so on. But try to get that very, very first rough draft of most of the content down on paper. And then I'm a lot better at being able to edit myself, go back and look at where I should move sentences around, go back and look at what my co-authors have done to make sure we're consistent and we're not saying the same thing in the same way multiple times. So that's kind of an edit piece of it. But in terms of the initial draft, I try to focus on how long do I have, what's my main topic, what evidence or specifics can I provide, and then just start blasting away and then, work on fixing it as I go through continuous iterations. Mm-hmm. Probably took me a few weeks to write the first draft. And then we spent the next, month or so collaborating, reviewing the whole thing together and, getting it to the point where it was ready to submit.
Mm-hmm. Considering the article that you've written, and it's really well written. Thank you very much for that. And it has very specific sections. And I heard earlier, Ishmael, that you said that had you done it on your own, it would have been 6 months maybe, but working together, it was about 3 to 4 months. So what sections, if somebody was to look at your paper right now, what sections are in there? What did you call out? What did this team call out for sections?
Okay, I briefly looked at it this morning too. We started with what the accreditation is as a term. April was the best because with the first call we had regional, international, and as a body of accreditation and overview of the ABAT. April Chung handled that. Mm-hmm. Marty is a criteria person and he handles the criteria committee. It is 3 years, Marty, 2 years, I'm not sure, several years. he took it over. Accreditation cycle, it's not a day or a month or just a year. You start from a year to the next year's summer commissioners meeting. And Vinny said, I can handle that, because he developed a graph and a timeline, task to do how things are moving. And myself, data collection, statistics through entire ABET website, I looked what are the current statistics and domestic accreditation, international accreditation. I contacted our institutional research, and somebody from the office helped us on a map. And in the continental US, the accredited schools internationally, which countries, how many programs, and we developed tables and graphs and diagrams. And that was the part that I had. Other than the coordination, my personal task was those current statistics, the data and graphics, domestic and international. That's what we handled it. Otherwise, if I do April's work myself, if I do Marty's work myself, you can imagine the workload, right? So tough.
Very difficult, very daunting. Thank you. Thank you. As I think someone mentioned it earlier, doing the research is really important, being able to validate what you're writing about, be able to substantiate it. So Vinny and Ishmael, this question's for you two. How did you find references to include in your paper?
Vinny, you want to start or you want me?
Yeah, no, let me start. I guess one of the things that I would obviously use Google. And remember, the paper was written about a year ago. So, this is all before ChatGPT and all this other AI information, that kind of systems that came out. But not being very specific, trying to just come out with some keywords and see if we could find some words that would kind of come out. And if you see the references, Wikipedia was used, but more for definitions and things like that. But it's a good, sometimes general place, because sometimes through those references, you can find other references that might be applicable. So not trying to be too specific. I mean, if we had done a search on what ABET means to two-year community colleges, I don't think we would have found very many articles or related objects and things like that. So kind of being, two-year programs and industry, kind of keywords that would kind of bring up different things, I think was important. Ishmael?
Yeah, you're right. And end of it, we put things to Google Doc, and they had their citations in the bracket. At the end, what we did, we used Mendeley, and Mendeley structured the references for us, and then the paper was ready. I mean, it was not just if it is 5 or 10 is easy, but we had 30 plus references. We needed to use a tool to structure the references, and end of it, it worked. And as you see, we have quite a bit of references and good sources.
Excellent.
Oh,
Great.
One last thing, Mel.
Yes, Benny.
I think we're all at institutions. Use your librarians, your research librarians. I think they're excellent. If anything else, they'll give you some ideas.
Another resource. And do not be afraid to reach out to those resources, right? That's what you're... Excellent. So, Ishmael, this question's for you, since you were the catalyst for this. What was the manuscript submission process like? And what documents did you need to upload?
Oh, thank you, Mel. This is a straightforward answer, and it is full Janet, and everything is pretty much clear on the website. You craft a cover letter. I was a corresponding author. I crafted a cover letter, and manuscript has a template. We populated the template, just a submission, then cross two fingers. You never know. It's blind review. And then we waited. I think 3 weeks later or a month later, we got the feedback, minor revisions, which made the changes, submitted again, and we heard the good news. That's how the procedure is. Online submission, wait for it, and the feedback you get, and just we followed it up, whatever the journal website tells us to do.
So it's pretty specific. It's like a step-by-step process that you can follow.
Yes, with
as
the
a team.
You better use the template. I mean, if you didn't use the template journal provided, maybe we could get a rejection directly, but we use their template and follow the instructions provided.
Mm-hmm. And that's very important with any submission, correct, Ishmael?
Yes, yes.
Okay, good. Excellent. I'm going to ask this question of Ishmael. I'm going to start with him, but I'd really like to hear all the panelists, because we've all been in a situation where we've had, or many of us have, I should make the assumption, but many of us have had peer-reviewed articles or proposals and things like that. And sometimes it's tough reading those peer reviews. So I'm going to start with Ishmael, and then I'm going to ask all the panelists to say a little bit about how they felt. What was the peer review process like for you, Ishmael? And how did reading the reviews make you feel? Or what did you do once you received those reviews?
Honestly, I do appreciate the journal for the quick reviews, and especially as a journal manager. Yes, Peter is the editor, but Peter has so much going on. You do the submission, I believe Janet manages quite a bit. Getting a quick feedback was a relaxation. Their journal takes 6 months or so. Yes, it's a new journal, very well established and dedicated people, NSF supported, and all good stuff behind it. Then we submit it, and I do really appreciate that we got the feedback in like 3 weeks or so. And that wasn't really nice to get a quick feedback. But, then the revision was minor. We quickly made it up. The enthusiasm or the support provided by the journal was good, I believe. I'm sure I didn't think the reviewers in the journal office liked the paper too. I kind of feel it that way. End of it, it worked it out. In our case, as you see. Do you guys want anything else? It was good work, dedicated work, and the outcome was the same. I think the results came out pretty good. We didn't wait like 3 months. There are papers that we've been chasing like 4 months or so. In this case, it was quick. This is what I feel.
Mm-hmm. April, how about you? What was the peer review process for you, and how did reading the reviews make you feel?
I really appreciate the reviews and the feedback. Now, like what Ishmael was saying, I think it was one of the better experience that I have in terms of writing and getting feedback. And if we expand out to other type of writing and peer review, we always we all have that kind of experience. And sometimes, and this experience is a lot is very good, but sometimes we would have faced experience that the feedback come back and mine heart stop pumping quickly because so what I usually do is take a deep breath first, put it aside for a little bit, and then you got to start thinking back to reviewers, and peer reviewers also. Is basically they try to be constructive, as constructive as possible. We all do our, when we're editing, we all try to, as constructive as possible. But sometimes things might not come out that way, but we have to go back to think behind it. And then we put so much effort into what we write, and sometimes it might not come across that way when somebody review it, and we just have to take a deep breath and then look at the constructive criticism in there, and then making the changes or the modification as we see fits.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Benny?
Pretty much. I mean, it's been covered, but I mean, constructive criticism is because one thing I want to say to any new author, don't take any of this personal. I mean, this is just, it's going to be, it's not criticism about you personally. It's a constructive element. Like was pointed out, this was also run through Tom Hall. This was run through Frank Hart. We even had to run it by ABET. As well. So there was, feedback at different stages along the line, and then it made the paper better. So
Excellent. Marty.
Yeah, I mean, I think in this particular case, I felt like we had really good alignment between what we were writing about and what the journal was interested in. And I think that's maybe a hallmark as opposed to, let's say, an unsolicited submission to a journal where, you worry a little bit more about whether or not this is the kind of article and the depth of writing that they're looking for. I mean, I think we had really good alignment in that case. And that's, of course, a tribute to Ishmael and, the way he got this, this whole process started, at least among us. So I'd say that's the case. The other thing is, I think we're all really confident based on the references we found, our experiences working with accreditation, and, the statistics and the data we cited of the value and the accuracy of what we were saying. So, I mean, to be honest, I didn't really expect substantive negative feedback. If there were things pointed out, I'd be all for, correcting them or clarifying them in some way. And I view that as very helpful. But in terms of, in general, I think we did, kind of an excellent job of getting all the facts straight. And, I think we all felt pretty good about that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. Excellent. Vinny, you touched on it just a moment ago on this question. And I think I'd like to hear from the different panelists as well, because we all see it from a different perspective. So what advice would you give to new writers who are starting their first peer-reviewed journal article or just embarking on this new journey?
My only advice would be that if you have an idea that you want to write about, or this even goes for a grant or anything else that you might be considering, start the process. I mean, the worst that can happen is they'll shoot you down. But again, and this goes with grants as well.
Yes,
you have another shot to take the criticism and make it better. So, I mean, in terms of the article, again, I mean, like I said before, right? It was a team effort, and I'm glad I was involved in this in a team, because I wouldn't have. But now I'm not afraid to start an article of my own. And again, it's take the criticism and take it as Marty said in April, is a constructive way of making things better, and eventually you'll get there.
Mm-hmm. And what was your term a few minutes ago when you said something? You said, "Don't take it personally. Don't take any of this personally." Yes. Ishmael, how about you? What would be the advice you'd give to a new writer?
Look at the literature, what others did. Google Scholar is there, sources is there. Even get some initial feedback. OpenAI today is getting very popular. Then merge with what you have, your search is, or your background and current work is, and the rest will come out. If there's a way, find collaborators and form a team, and that will quicken your process.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
That's what I would suggest. Yeah.
April, what would be advice you'd give?
I think Ishmael and Vinny has really good suggestions, and I'm similar to that first step. You gotta have that first step, and then after you have your first one, you would start feeling a little bit more, immune to the, to some of those criticism that don't take it personally. The more you do it, the better you're gonna get. So that's what I would say.
So practice. The more you do it, the more practice. Very good. And Marty, final word on that.
Yeah. So, and I like to think about things like, in addition to the content that you're writing about, I think Ishmael talked a lot about, what you could do there to ensure you're, consistent with and building on other work in this area is things like the process, right? Make sure you understand what the process that the journal is requesting, the templates, the subject matter itself is consistent with what they're interested in. Establish relationships with the folks you're going to be working with at the journal so that you can stay in lockstep as you move forward. The people that you work with, right? The team that collaborates with you on the article. I talked about this earlier, but pick people who you feel are knowledgeable and good to work with in dividing and conquering on this topic.
Mm-hmm.
And then this is maybe a small thing, but put in things that will make this interesting for the reader. So it's not just about text and more text and more text, but include other things, diagrams and pictures and statistics and tables and things that appeal to, different people in different ways. So it's not necessarily just a lot of text, but, find other ways to also make it interesting.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you. In a moment, we're going to move a little bit more into ABET, but I have one more question because a lot of you, all four panelists have said their experience with ABET, what they've done, their give back to the community and all that, which is really wonderful. And I'm sure that your students benefit by it, as do your institutions. But how important is it to you, in your opinion, to have a mentor or to find a mentor to work with when you're starting out? Ishmael?
It's very important. That's the person who gives you the insight and encouragements and energy and motivation. I see it essential. I wish everybody has a mentor, but it's not the case. Most of the time, you don't have anybody as a mentor and you struggle in trying to find a way by yourself. And it's a really big challenge. That's what I see.
April?
So I have at different areas, I have different mentors, and I really rely on the relationship that I built throughout the different work that we have done. And so I always needed somebody to bounce the idea off of a different perspective, because as we write and as we work on our things, we tend to be focus, or I at least focus on very narrowly on getting that particular thing the way I see it done. And when somebody read it or somebody see it, they can give me a different perspective that open my eyes up and widen that view a little bit more. And so that's really important. And I always, whatever I do, when I write something, I always identify some, so not just one, mentors that I can reach out to and then bounce off of, first of the outline. How is it flow? And then, going through the process, somebody to bounce off the ideas off of, and then giving me some advice, who else to reach out to. Those type of information are very helpful. And then we also need to give back, being mentor for others, for that similar, perspective too.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Marty?
I actually think a mentor is fairly important. And, in the context of writing a peer-reviewed article like this, I don't think if I had just started from scratch, let's say, back when I was doing this more often, I would have had any idea how to start, what to do exactly. So the way I would start is by working with people who had been authors or co-authors of peer-reviewed articles before and found something of interest to me, and either I was asked or I would ask them if I could participate. And then I'd sort of watch the process and learn from that so that I could, pass on my experience to others later. But I think in many
Excellent.
areas, whether it's papers or other aspects of our career, having a mentor is, is helpful.
Wonderful. Great. Vinny, any last thoughts?
I agree with everything that was said. I mean, a mentor in different areas is perfect, or collaborators and people you respect and are willing to go on a project together, I think is kind of a critical thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been fortunate to have them at different levels.
Thank you. Excellent.
Of course, for this particular paper, of course, Ishmael was all of our mentors, so that just made our lives easier.
Which is my next question is to Ishmael from the audience. Ishmael, the question is, I understand that in order to submit to JATE, you need to provide options for reviewers. How did the authors decide which reviewers were the optimal for your article?
You know who is in this field and who could be a good fit, but you're right. You think about it and look, you might Google. If you know somebody that's very good, put their name there. If not, the editorial office make a decision. Editor or associate editors will find people, send it over and solicit feedback. But in this case, you got to know some people who can get you some good feedback. That doesn't mean that the editorial office will send them directly, but it will at least give them a guidance whom they'll pick to send your paper to get some feedback about you. So that's how it usually works, you know.
Mm-hmm. Good, thank you. Thank you for that. We have another question from the audience, and I'd really like to address it to anybody, maybe April, on this one. Today, engineering is very diverse, like biomedical engineering, mechatronics engineering, and systems engineering. What are the rules for ABET accreditation of these programs?
Oh, so there is two different things that I want to say about this. So for those programs, if there is a program specific criteria that relating to their program, they go for those accreditation. If they don't, then they will go for the general criteria, and that is sometimes it's a little bit about the curriculum of the program and also the name of the program for going on accreditation. Now, a program who hasn't been accredited, they have to go for a readiness review, depending on the institution in their experience with ABET accreditation. So they will go through that to see whether they are ready or not. So that's for new programs. Now, for as you're mentioning about the newer fields, the fields are evolving, right? And so there might be new criteria that will needs to be established, and that's what Marty mentioned a little bit a while ago with Ishmael, that mechatronics program criteria is new. And how did it get established to become a program criteria so that programs out there with mechatronics name can be used, can use these program criteria? There's also a process that maybe Marty can talk a little bit about that.
Sure. Yeah. As April said, there are two sets of criteria. So the question about how do all these different aspects of engineering, how do they handle those? It's by separating out the specifics of that discipline from general criteria that's required of any program that we review and accredit. It covers things like ensuring the program itself establishes educational objectives and student outcomes that make sense for their program. We don't tell them what those are. We give them guidance, and it's up to the programs to define them and demonstrate to us they're being communicated and they're being, and the curriculum is driving students towards those outcomes. It's a little bit about faculty, about general curriculum requirements. For example, content in math, natural science, the technical courses in the program, ensuring that the faculty have the right skills to teach in that program. And there's enough institutional support. But for mechatronics, which is interesting because there are now 3 societies who provide input into the program criteria for that multidisciplinary program. And there could potentially have been even more than that. That's where you can start to drill down in the program criteria, which is an adjunct to the general criteria for criteria, for curriculum and for faculty requirements. And that's when we can start to get a little bit more in depth on specific topics, right? Rather than the ones that span all programs. These are now specific to that discipline.
Good. Thank you. Thank you. Vinny, this is a question for a 2-year, from a 2-year perspective. The question is, what are the main factors that two-year programs need to consider, and how do these factors differ from those faced by four-year programs?
Mel, and it kind of goes back to the earlier question too. Somebody was asking about different levels of education. ABET does accredit two-year programs and obviously four-year programs and even graduate degrees, but it depends on the commission. And so that's one of the things when we talk about all four of us are from ETAC. So the two-year programs, basically the difference would be the criteria that they have to adhere to. The general criteria, and that's really the difference in terms of that. And then also the, obviously, if there's specific program criteria, the same thing. But some two-year engineering science programs are accredited under a different commission, ANSAC. So that, again, can be different depending on the program. Mm-hmm. So, you know, whether it's a two-year program or four-year program, it kind of goes back to something April and Marty alluded to is what are the goals of the program? So when it comes to determining which commission should be addressing or the accreditation for that particular program, sometimes it boils down to what are the outcomes from that particular program? What are the goals from that program? So hopefully that answers those questions.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. That's very, very helpful. So as we move into the closing of this panel, it's been excellent. Thank you very much. It's been wonderful. We have the question of whether the Journal for Advanced Technological Education is going to stay online or will we make it a hybrid? Ishmael, you're very close to the JATE editorial board, as is Ms. Janet Pinhorn. What's your thought on that?
Journal's been decided to be the online, but to increase the dissemination. There was one issue last fall, hard copy. This year, there's another hard copy coming up. Yes, once in a while we'll have the hard copies, but the final goal is to be the online. That's the trend going around the world, just to increase the dissemination and impact of the work presented by the authors. That's what I could say. But other than that, Janet is our manager, journal manager. She does the in-house work quite a bit. This is what I see. Once in a while, we handle the reviews. We just get the feedback and dump it over all the publications. We get the DOII. We got the Library of Congress, ISSN numbers. The journal is moving because that's funded by NSF program officers, NSF funding, NSF centers. Down the road, this journal will be the voice of advanced technological education, and it will be highly respected by the educators, industry, and technology centers. That's what I see. But for keeping it as all hard copy, I just wanted to hear from Janet a little bit. I see that's not an intention, but she's the voice. She can say more.
Janet.
Hi, Mel. Hi. Thank you, Ishmael. Our attention at this point is to obviously keep this. It is an online journal primarily. However, for particular conferences and as again you mentioned for dissemination purposes, we will have specific copies or issues that will be printed. For example, our high-tech conference coming up in July, we will have a themed issue based on industry, what their take on all of this is. And then for ATEPI conference in the fall, we are looking forward to having a undergraduate themed issue. So these are very specific issues that will be printed. It's not every issue. It's like I said, it's primarily online.
Yes, thank you. Thank you all for coming. Thank you to the panelists, and I am sure that any of the panelists will be open to any questions from our audience in the future. If you want, you can go onto the ABET website, which is abet.org, to learn more about ABET. And I really want to say thank you so much. It was a great panel. We've learned a lot, and we encourage all of you to look at being a journal writer, look at being potentially an evaluator or applying to be a trainee in evaluation. and get to know more about ABET in the 2-year programs and in the 4-year programs. So I would like to say thank you so much to the panelists. It's been wonderful. I've learned a lot. And everybody have a great weekend, and thank you so much.